Hi everyone, it's been a while and I've seen a lot of requests for videos and I'm now relatively free, so I think I can get back to making some more videos. So this time I'm going to start with a video on something called liberal paradox. I know most of the videos that I have made so far are related to computer science or some discrete math, graph theory sort of stuff. This comes from a field that does involve a lot of rigorous math. It's something that is called social choice theory. It comes from that field, and why I decided to make this video is that I met a very good mathematician philosopher named Rohit Parikh. You can check him out on his Wikipedia page. He's a mathematician, logician, philosopher. Uh, is quite a intelligent guy. So he introduced me to this thing called liberal paradox, and I was completely unaware of this thing, that there is a field called social choice theory in which you people argue about societies, things like democracy, resource allocation, decision making in mathematical formal terms. So I got very much interested, and that's what I'm going to talk about today. So what is liberal paradox? So uh, a bit of introduction. It was given by none other than our famous Indian economist Amartya Sen. What am I writing? Economist Amartya Sen. I think this thing was given around 1970 in his paper called "The Impossibility of a Paretian Liberal." Right. So why this is important is that this talks about certain impossibilities in a society, right? Like I'll talk about it exactly. So it says that if you want to ensure some sort of efficiency and also want to ensure some sort of minimal individual rights or these liberal rights, then you end up in a paradox. It's not possible to satisfy both of them simultaneously. So I'll write down what exactly this is. So it is sort of impossible to ensure both efficiency, and what do we mean by efficiency is a special kind of efficiency I'll talk about, and minimal uh, individual freedom. It So minimal individual freedom. So what Sain has argued in that paper in 1970 is that it is to have a minimal efficiency of some kind. It's called Pareto efficiency. I'll talk about it, what is Pareto efficiency, and a minimal individual freedom on which our modern societies are based. So he talks about that you have a society and there are individuals in that society and they have their preferences, their choices. Like suppose any sort of choice, it could be elections in which you are voting for some candidates and you have a preference. Okay, I want to see this particular guy above some other guy in my preference order, and you want to respect some individual freedoms, right? And you want to attain this Pareto efficiency in under that circumstances. So basically you want to come up with an outcome where different individuals have different choices, and you want to say, okay, which choice is better, because different individuals might have different choices, and you end up with this thing that it is impossible to have both Pareto efficiency and minimal individual freedom. So I'll start with talk about what is Pareto efficiency. Okay, so I'll talk about Pareto efficiency. So it's named after an economist whose surname was Pareto, I think. So what it says is that a resource allocation is Pareto efficient, okay, if it cannot be Pareto improved. So there is no Pareto improvement possible. No Pareto improvement possible. That is Pareto efficient system. Okay. Now you'll say, what is this Pareto improvement? So Pareto improvement means that you are able to Pareto improve something if you can make someone better off without making someone else worse. So for example, suppose I have 100 coins with me. Suppose I have 100 coins with me and I have two persons, person A and person B, right? If I give 50 coins to person A and 50 coins to person B, then there is no possibility of Pareto improvement out here. So if I want to give, let's say, 10 coins to A, then I have to take 10 coins from B, right? Suppose I want to make this 60 and this, then I have to take 10 coins from here. So I made A better, but by making B worse. So there is no Pareto improvement possible. So that's why this is Pareto efficient, right? Similarly, suppose I had started with some sort of distribution that out of these 100 coins I have given 80 to A and 20 to B. Is this Pareto efficient? This is also Pareto efficient, because again, right, to make B better I have to take from A. So to make B better I have to make A worse. So this is, again, there is no scope of Pareto improvement, so this is also Pareto efficient. That's about Pareto efficiency. So Pareto efficiency has nothing to do with what's called basic justice or equitable distribution. So it is quite possible that I give all the 100 coins to A and 0 to B and it is still Pareto efficient, because to make B better I have to take from A. So that's what they are talking about, that this minimal efficiency, this basic idea of efficiency, that this is Pareto efficiency, and minimum individual freedom is very abstract, and we'll see an example that Sen has talked about in that paper to explain this liberal paradox. So we know what Pareto efficiency is: to make someone better, right, without making someone else worse. If you can do that, that is Pareto efficient. Okay, so here there is a very mathematical, rigorous, formal proof of this liberal paradox, or Sen's paradox, or impossibility of Paretian liberal, as it is the title of the paper. But I won't go into the paradox, but I'll explain it using the example that Amartya Sen himself gives in that paper. So let me rub this off and come to that example. Okay, so he talks about an example from this book called, not from this book but about this book actually. So D.H. Lawrence, he wrote a book which was called Lady Chatterley's Lover, right? And it was back in that day, it was quite a controversial book, that some people thought it was obscene, vulgar, indecent, against morality. All those kind of allegations and charges were made against this book. So let's take an example from this book. This example is completely attributed to Amartya Sen. It's not my example, it's his example I'm presenting. So let's start with it. So there is this book. Okay, so we have this book, right? This book is Lady Chatterley's Lover. This book is there. So LDL, Lady Chatterley's Lover, LCL, sorry, whatever. And let's talk about, there are two persons. So we have a very simple toy example, a simplistic scenario in which there are two persons. Let's call the first person Lewd. His name is Lewd, which will be represented by L, and there is another person called Prude, which is represented by P. Okay, these are two guys. So L is some guy out here, Prude is some other guy out here. Now they give their preferences, right? So Lewd is a guy who thinks that there's no indecency in Lady Chatterley's Lover, but of course we should be very open about such matters of sexuality or relationships. So he says that there is nothing wrong with it. So he has a certain preferences. So in a simple society with only Lewd Prude, what kind of preferences one can have? Like if you want to make a decision whether who should read this book or nobody should read this book. So Lewd says that it's very bad if we say that someone should read this book. So N stands for nobody reads this book, right? Okay, N stands for nobody reads this book. So Lewitt prefers that he will read this book instead of nobody reading it. So this greater sign shows preference out here, right? Okay, this L is greater than N means that this guy Lewitt prefers that he will read this book instead of nobody reading this, but he is a bit naughty, so he says that I would like even Prout to read this book. So he says that it's even better because Prout is so conservative that he gotta read this book to come out of those, conservative shackles. So he would like Prout to see this, to read this book, then himself, and then nobody. That's Lewitt. But what about Prout? Prout thinks that this book is so indecent, so unethical, immoral, and so vulgar that nobody should read it. Okay, that's his first preference. And if anyone has to read it, it should be him instead of Lewitt, because he thinks he's very, very sane, very intelligent, and he holds the beacon of morality. So instead of letting this disgusting Lewitt read this book, he himself wants to read this book. So suppose these are the preferences. These are what we call preferences given by both of these guys, and the society is made up of only these two guys. Let's say that. Okay, so these are the preferences. Now let's talk about this thing that if we have to decide, right? Now it's like voting, right? You said, Lewitt said, okay, I want this, Prout said, I want this, and let's is it possible to come out of a mechanism in which we'll decide whether Prout, Lewitt, or nobody reads the books that is both what? Pareto efficient and respects minimal individual freedom. So I'll talk about what is individual freedom out here, right? We saw what Pareto efficient was, so I'll talk about what individual freedom is. So in this case, let's say individual freedom means that if we talk about an individual, Lewitt or Prout, and the choice is between that guy reading the book and nobody reading the book, right? So for example, this is the choice, like Lewitt versus nobody, or nobody versus Prout. If that is the choice, then we have to let the choice of that individual dominate, because that's his personal freedom, because it's the choice between his choice and like whether he wants to read the book, whether he should be allowed to read the book, or nobody reads the book. So in that case, the preference that that guy chooses, because it becomes a matter of individual freedom in that case, right? Whether I am reading or nobody is reading, so we allow him some individual freedom, that whatever that guy's preference is, that should be allowed, right? That's the idea of minimal individual freedom. So is it ever possible to come up with such a system that satisfies both Pareto efficiency and minimal individual freedom? And it turns out that it's a paradox. You cannot come up with such a system. Why? Let's look at it. So suppose the system says that nobody should read the book. Suppose it says that nobody should read the book, then what have we done? See, Lewitt had higher preference for himself reading this book instead of nobody reading this book. So if we let nobody read this book, then we have violated Lewitt's personal freedom, right? This minimal individual freedom of Lewitt has been violated out here, because that's how we defined minimal individual freedom, that between nobody and the guy himself, the preference of the guy should be allowed. I mean, that should prevail. And out here we see that if nobody is the choice, then clearly Lewitt is losing minimal individual freedom. What about Prout? Suppose if we go for Prout, then again what we see out here is, if we let Prout read the book, then for Prout we are again losing minimal individual freedom, because Prout would prefer that nobody read the book instead of reading him, so again, right, Prout would have preferred nobody over him reading the book. His individual freedom has been violated. So this case is not possible, this case is not possible. Now we are left with the last case of L. If Lewitt reads the book, then what happens? If Lewitt reads the book, then obviously that there's no difficulty in individual freedom out here because Lewd was more than n, but what we have lost out here is Pareto efficiency. Why? You see why out here. So Lewd is allowed to read the book, but we see that for both Lewd and Prude there is a better alternative possible which can be made without making anyone worse, right? So if you say Lewd is allowed to read the book, but we say that Lewd would prefer that Prude read the book, P, and Prude would also prefer that he reads the book instead of Lewd. So if we let Prude read the book, we have made actually both of them better without making anyone worse, right? So going for L, there is a scope of Pareto improvement out here by giving the book to P. So we are losing Pareto efficiency in this case. So there was only three possibilities: that nobody reads the book, Prude reads the book, and Lewd reads the book. And in all the three cases, we have seen that either you lose minimal individual freedom, which was in this case you lose freedom, minimal individual freedom, or you lose Pareto efficiency. And that's the paradox. So with this example, that you can come up with such a scenario that shows that there is this kind of paradox, and that's liberal paradox, or impossibility of Paretian liberal, which means that such a liberal possibility is not there, which is both Pareto efficient and respects minimal individual freedom. And in the paper, the actual 1970 paper, there is this example is there, but there is a very formal, rigorous proof also out there, which works for almost any case. But I have not gone into that. Now, what are the implications for this? So a lot of people have said that this challenges the idea by market fundamentalists that markets are both efficient and respect individual freedom. That's the buzz thing. These fundamentalists, they always go after, oh, markets are not only efficient, they respect individual freedom. But clearly with this thing, he sort of challenged that. I'm saying challenged that idea. Not only challenged, and if this theorem can be understood in that light, he sort of destroyed that idea that markets are both efficient and respect individual freedom. So that's it. I hope you liked this thing.